Okay, this is going to be your Keystone review packet, numbers 11 through 20. Take a look at number 11. We're again working with correlations represented by scatter plots. So just keep in mind that a positive relationship is going to go upward, a negative relationship is going to go downward. And if you take a look at the scatter plot that's given to you in number 11, if I were to draw a line in here, you would see that it is neither positive or negative. There really is no correlation between all the points that are graphed. Alright, so number 12, you have Evan driving between 45 and 60 miles per hour on his commute. You can represent the distance he travels by the systems of inequalities below. Now, I don't have it written there, so I'm going to write it for you. But you have y is greater than 0.75x and y is less than x. So what you want to do is you want to take a look at these two systems of inequalities, and you want to let x equal the number of minutes and you want y to be the number of miles. So if you take a look at the first one, it's saying that the number of miles is greater than 0.75x. Okay, and you're probably wondering where you get the 0.75, but if you would take your 45 and your 60 miles an hour and divide them, you would get the 0.75. So if we take a look at option A says when the number of minutes he's driven is 60, the miles he has driven is between 15 and 16. So what you want to do here is you actually want to, for each one of these problems, let's say A, you want to plug the value of 60 in for x into both of these equations. And if I would do that, I would have 0.75 times 60, and then I would also have y is less than 60. So if you took the 0.75 times your 60, you're going to get 45. So it says that y is greater than 45 and y is less than 60. So if you look at option A, it says that the miles he's driven is between 15 and 60. So that is actually false. It does not make that a true statement. You're going to continue with B, C, and D, and you're going to find out which one of these options are true statements. So go ahead and you need to finish the work for B, C, and D and give me a final answer and make sure you show that on your work. For number 13, it says for you to graph the following inequality on the number line below. Here's the inequality that we have. We have negative 2x plus 7 is less than or equal to 4x plus 13. What you need to do here is you need to actually get the x by itself. So I always draw these. You don't need to do that. But we want to get our x's on both sides here. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to add 2x to both sides. You end up with 6x plus 13. Again, our goal is to get the x by itself. So my next step is to subtract 13 from both sides. I'm left with 6x and negative 6. Divide both sides by 6, and we get x is greater than or equal to negative 1. If it helps you to flip that around, just make sure that that open mouth that's towards the x stays that way when you flip it around. So you have x is greater than or equal to negative 1. So we know that we're going to graph our point up here above negative 1, and it's going to be a closed circle because of that or equal to symbol underneath our inequality. Now all of the numbers greater than -1 are to the right. Number 14 is very similar. We have 0 is less than 2x plus 6 is less than or equal to 10. Now, some of you may have been taught to write these as two separate inequalities, and some of you may have been taught to solve it all as one, and looking at it as you have the two in one kind of inequality. I'm going to solve it the second way that I've described, and if you need me to show you how to separate them into two separate inequalities, you can come see me and I'll help you out with that. But basically, again, our goal is to get this x by itself. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 6. Now I have to do that to both sides of the inequality there. So that's going to leave me with -6. I have 2x left in the middle, and I have 4 left on the right-hand side. Now to get my x alone, I need to divide by 2, and you need to make sure you do that to all the sides. You're left with x, a -3, and a 2. Alright, so now you can look at these again as two separate inequalities, but what you should identify is when things are written all as one like this, it's an and inequality. And means that you're going to have that bar that connects in the middle. Let's first take a look at this part right here. The x is greater than, because that open mouth is next to the x. So it's greater than -3, and it's going to be an open circle above your -3 because there's no or equal to line there. Then if you take a look at this one here in black, you have x is less than or equal to 2. So that or equal to means we're going to have a closed circle above the 2. Now it was greater than that -3, but it was also less than the 2. So your inequality is going to be graphed as shown above. Number 15, you're given the graphed inequality, and what they want you to do here is they want you to actually write the expression that can be put in place of the question mark. So if you take a look at what they give you there, they want to know what equation or inequality is going to go in the middle there in those operations in order to make the graph that they give you up here correct, right? So basically the way I want you to look at this is I want you to understand or ask yourself the question, what do you need to do to both of these, okay, to both of these, to get a -10 and a 6? So this is how I want you to look at it. Let's rewrite these. Okay, we need, in order to get a -1, this is saying that x is going to be greater than -1. This one is saying that you need x to be less than 7. So what do I need to do to -1 to get -10? And what do I need to do to 7 to get 6? So a lot of this is probably going to be some guess and check for you, but basically I would take and tackle one at a time. So what do I need to do to -1 in order to get -10? Well, my first suggestion is let's take a look and let's multiply by 2. Alright, if I multiply by 2, I'm going to get a -2. And then you can ask yourself, okay, well, -2, how am I going to get to -10? Well, you could think to yourself, well, I could either multiply by 5 or I could add a -8 or subtract 8, however you want to look at it. But let's take a look at multiplying by 2 over on this side. So that would give me 14. So now how do I get from 14 to 6? Well, remember my option over here on this side was to either subtract 8 or to multiply by 5. Let's take a look at the options over here, subtracting by 8 or multiplying by 5. Well, if I would subtract, we know that both of the options over here on the left-hand side would give me -2. But over here, 14 minus 8 would give me 6, but 14 times 5 is not going to give me 6. So, our option that works for both is to subtract 8, Now I've got my -10 and 6. So the operations that I did to both of them were to multiply by 2 and subtract 8. So I have to take my value here of x and multiply by 2 and then subtract 8. Now my suggestion to you is when you're doing this on your own on a test and you just feel like you're lost or you're confused, if you follow these steps, it will help you, but always check your answer. I would always work through this problem, add 8 to both sides, divide by 2, make sure that it works to give you that -1 and that 7 that you needed that was represented on the graph. Number 16, it says Halloween attraction charges $52 for a day pass and $95 for a night pass. Last October, 86 day passes were sold and 1,245 night passes were sold. What's the closest estimate? Okay, so this is where they're working on your estimation skills. So I know a lot of kids and they like to look at things differently. Some kids will just go right ahead and they'll understand that the $52 is going to get multiplied by 86. And they're going to get the 4,472. They're going to get actual numbers or exact numbers. And then you take the $95 times the 1,245 night passes and you get your answer. Now, what some kids do is from this point, they'll go ahead, add that, and then they'll estimate or round and look at the options that they have for A, B, C, and D. So if you did it this way, you would see that A would be your best option. But some kids go for the estimation right off the bat. So I'll show that in red. So they take the $52 and they estimate that to be 50. They take the 86 passes and estimate that to be 90. Then they take the $95, estimate that to be 100, and they estimate the number of night passes to 1,200. Then when you do your multiplication there, you're going to come up with a number, 124,500, and again, looking at your options, option A is best. Alright, for number 17, I'm just going to go ahead and write the expression down here. The expression is x to the 4th minus x squared minus 12. It says when this is factored completely, which of the following is one of the factors? So the first thing we need to do is we need to create our two sets of parentheses that are going to allow us to start our factoring. So I'm going to take a look at what's going to go in my first positions here. Those have to multiply to give me x to the 4th power. So I'm going to write x squared and x squared. The next thing that I'm going to look for is these last two positions. They have to multiply to give me -12. Okay, but keeping in mind that this is like a -1 there in the middle. So these two have to multiply to give me -12, but they also have to add to give me the -1. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a little table and know that it has to multiply to give me -12, but it's got to add to give me a -1. So if I start thinking of some combinations there, I know that -6 times 2, -4 times 3, We could do 4 times negative 3. And then when you look at what they add up to, this would give me a negative 4, negative 1, 1. Okay, so right here's our combination that works. So we're going to have a minus 4 and a plus 3. Now, if you take a look at number 17 and you look at the options that are given to you there, what you want to take a look at is, okay, well, we've got that x squared minus 4 is our option in A. Then we've got x squared minus 6, so that's not one of our options, so you can cross off B. And then you've got the x squared minus 2 and the x minus 2. Now, what I want to caution you here is they'll do this a lot. See the word completely up there in the problem. What they'll do is they'll just assume that you get to this point and you go, oh, x squared minus 4, that's the answer. The key is that you have to factor it completely. So that means you have to identify that this right here can be broken down again. So this can be factored again into x plus 2, x minus 2. So when factored completely, this is actually your answer. So when you look at your options, D is one of the ones that actually works for you because that's when it's factored completely. So just be careful when you're factoring. Make sure that you break everything down as much as you can. In number 18, we've got negative 2x to the third plus 4x squared plus 16x over negative 2x to the third plus 18x squared minus 40x. What they want you to do here is they want you to simplify this. So it looks very daunting at first, but what I want you to try to find first is what GCF I can pull out of this top piece and this bottom piece. So if I'm looking at the GCF of the top piece, it looks like with my numbers here, I could pull out a negative 2. So I'm going to pull that negative 2 out of the top. Also going to pull that out of the bottom. Now if I take a look at my X pieces here, looks like I can pull a single X from all three groups, same as on the bottom. Alright, so now let's rewrite and let's pull that negative 2x out of each of our things here. And we're going to have, write that in black for you here, we're going to have x squared minus 2x minus 8. And then you're going to have x squared minus 9x plus 20. What I want you guys to be careful of here is I want you to make sure that you pulled the GCF properly, out properly. So what I mean by that is maybe go back and say to yourself, okay, does this times this give me that? Does this times this give me this? Does this times this give me that? Make sure you pulled that out properly. You can kind of check yourself and go back and check your work. Same thing on the bottom. Make sure that you multiplied everything out, because when you see the negative 2 times the negative 9, that gives me that positive 18 in the middle there. Now, the next thing you're going to have to do here is you're actually going to have to factor these pieces in the parentheses. So when we do that, I'll draw a line here in our different. Right, so now we still have our negative 2x up top, negative 2x on the bottom. Alright, so let's factor the x squared minus 2x minus 8. So remember, x and x, that has to multiply to give me that first piece there. And then it has to multiply to negative 8, but add to give me negative 2. So when we multiply to the negative 8, negative 4 and a positive 2 will work, because negative 4 times 2 gives me negative 8, but it adds to that negative 2. Let's factor the bottom. Has to multiply to give me a positive 20, but add to give me negative 9. And negative 5 and negative 4 work. Now what we can do is we can actually look to see what will cancel or cross out. So when we do that, we can see that these are going to cancel. This grouping will cancel. So what we're left with is an x plus 2 over x minus 5. And when you look at your options, that would be option D. Alright, number 19. It always helps to have a picture. So in this case, they did give you a picture, but what I want you to do is, if they don't, actually draw it. It really, really helps. In part A, they're asking you to write an expression in simplified form that represents the area of the garden. Remember, area for a rectangle is length times width. So we're actually taking, for part A, we're taking that length times the width. Now if you take a look, they asked you to write it in simplified form. So that means they want you to actually write it as the x squared minus 2x. I just did distributive property there to get that. Now in B, they're asking you to, or telling you that Sean adds a fence 3 feet from the edge of the garden. Alright, so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to add this fence on the outside. What I want you to understand here, okay, now they're going to ask you to do the area again, but you need to know what your new area is, or your new length and your new width. So if you add that 3 feet around the whole garden, let's take a look at our length here. We've added 3 inches on this side of our length and added 3 inches on this side of our length. So that actually means that my new length is x plus 6. When we look at our new width over here, I added 3 inches there and I added 3 inches this way. So it's actually x minus 2 plus 6, which we're going to simplify to just be x plus 4. So now when you do your length times your width, it's going to be x plus 6, x plus 4. You're multiplying that for the area. So now what you need to make sure you do is you need to use your FOIL or your box method or your double distributive, however you actually solve for these polynomials here, or to write the polynomial expression. And once you do that, you should have x squared plus 10x plus 24. Now, if you have a question on how I got that, just come up and ask me and I'll review those different methods with you, the FOIL, the box method, all of those. In part C, it's saying he's unhappy with his fence, so he decides to put a fence within a different distance from the garden and around the garden. So what he actually did here is they want you to do the total area of the new fence and determine the new distance and show all the work. So what he basically did here is he took and added an extra 2 feet from the edge of the garden. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase. Oh, I can't erase that one. Oh, that stinks. Alright, I'm going to draw an original garden again. Okay, you're going to take the original garden and you're going to have the x and the x minus 2. He's taking from the original garden and he's adding a fence now that's 2 feet on each side. So that would make this length x plus 4, because you have 2 and 2, which is the 4 feet. And then he's taking the extra 4 feet here, so x minus 2 plus 4, sorry I'm writing over my work there, which is actually going to give you the x plus 2. So you're going to have x plus 4 times x plus 2. Same process you did in B. And then when you do this, you're going to get x squared plus 6x plus 8. Now, the part that I didn't include in here, which you're going to have to show in your work when you give to me, is this explanation. You have to explain why you did each step. So you could actually go through and write and say, I drew a new garden with the original lengths and the original widths. I added the fence around. I added in the 4 feet to each side. And go through and everything that went through the conversation that we had and what goes through your brain, you want to write down there. So that piece is not included in here, but I will be looking for that in your work. And number 20. Number 20 says, which expression has the same value as 2 times 2 to the negative second power, all to the fifth power? Alright, so what you need to do here is you need to take care of what's in parentheses first. So remember, this is like to the exponent of 1. So when we have like bases of the 2, we can add the exponents. So it's 1 plus your negative 2. That gives you 2 to the negative first power. Now we're going to take that to the fifth power. Now remember, a power to a power, you multiply those. So you're going to take negative 1 times the 5, so 2 to the negative fifth power. And if you look at your options there, that is option B.